From accidental deaths during filming to billion-dollar classified secrets leaked on screen, the making of The Hunt for Red October is filled with bizarre twists stranger than fiction. The USS Dallas wasn't just a submarine in a movie, it became a naval legend with real sailors taking leave to act in their own story, while the production triggered FBI investigations, fatal accidents, and inadvertently declassified top-secret U.S. military technology. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about The Hunt for Red October's USS Dallas. Fact 1. A real tugboat sank with fatal consequences. On June 14, 1989, a tragic accident occurred during the production of The Hunt for Red October that resulted in the death of a real person. The USS Houston, a Los Angeles-class nuclear submarine that was being used to portray the USS Dallas in exterior shots, was traveling submerged through the waters near Santa Catalina Island off the coast of Long Beach, California, preparing for scheduled filming later that day. At approximately 4:45 in the morning, while the submarine was running beneath the surface at periscope depth, one of its extended masts became entangled with a 1,600-foot steel tow cable that belonged to a tugboat called the Barcona. The Barcona was a 73-foot, 97-ton tugboat operated by Connolly Pacific Company, and at the time of the accident, it was towing 2 empty barges through a thick fog from Santa Catalina Island to Long Beach Harbor, where they would be loaded with rocks for pier construction. When the Houston's antenna snagged the tow cable and the submarine suddenly went to depth at speed, the Barcona was violently jerked backward with such tremendous force that water came crashing over the stern of the boat, and the rear windows were completely knocked out. The 2 crew members who had been sleeping below deck, Captain Mike Link and deckhand Daniel Rodriguez, were jolted awake by the impact and rushed to find out what was happening. The pilot, 32-year-old Brian Bellinger, who had been alone in the wheelhouse navigating through the fog, decided to go check the engine room to understand what was pulling them backward at roughly 10 knots. Within less than 1 minute from the initial impact, the tugboat was dragged stern first underwater and sank in 2,400 feet of water. Rodriguez and Link managed to jump overboard and swim to one of the empty barges, where they were eventually rescued by another tugboat called the My Way. Brian Bellinger, a father of 2 children, went down with the Barcona, and his body was never recovered despite an extensive day-long search involving 4 Coast Guard vessels, 2 helicopters, and the Houston itself. The Navy didn't report the accident to the Coast Guard until over an hour after it happened, and both Paramount Pictures and the Navy insisted that the accident was completely unrelated to the film production, even though the Houston was specifically in that location to assist with filming scheduled for later that same day. Fact 2. The film accidentally exposed classified military technology. In one of the most bizarre security breaches in Hollywood history, The Hunt for Red October accidentally revealed a billion-dollar classified military secret right there on the big screen. During a tense scene where the USS Dallas is tracking the Red October through an underwater canyon, crew members can be heard calling out that they're detecting milligal anomalies to help navigate silently through the darkness. To most moviegoers in 1990, this technical jargon probably sounded like typical submarine mumbo-jumbo, but to people in the defense community, it was a shocking revelation. A milligal is a unit of measurement used in gravimetry, which is the science of measuring gravitational fields, and what that dialogue essentially confirmed was that American submarines were using gravity sensors to navigate underwater without making any sound. The reason this was such a big deal comes down to how submarine detection normally works. Traditional sonar systems send out sonic pings to map the ocean floor and detect obstacles, but those pings also reveal your location to any enemy submarine listening nearby. A submarine equipped with gravimetry technology could essentially run completely silent by sensing tiny variations in Earth's gravitational field caused by underwater mountains, trenches, and other features. It was thought to be one of the most sophisticated and expensive black projects in the U.S. Navy's arsenal, with the development of the full tensor gravity gradiometer by Bell Aerospace reportedly costing around $1 billion. The technology had been secretly deployed on only a few Ohio-class submarines after it was first developed back in 1973. The film caused what sources described as a minor sensation in the Black Project's submarine warfare technology community. Interestingly enough, Tom Clancy had actually described this navigation method in his original novel 6 years earlier. But seeing it confirmed on screen in a major Hollywood production was a different matter entirely. The classified technology was officially declassified just a few months after the movie's release, and Bell Aerospace later sold the technology to Bell Geospace for commercial oil exploration purposes. Fact 3. Real sailors from USS Dallas took leave to act in the movie. When most movies need submarine crew members, they hire actors and give them a crash course in looking like they know what they're doing. But for The Hunt for Red October, the production team quickly realized that teaching Hollywood extras how to act like real submariners was nearly impossible. So they decided to do something that had never been done before on this scale. They just hired actual submariners instead. The movie featured the USS Dallas as the American submarine tracking the Red October, and in a strange twist of reality meeting fiction, sailors from the real USS Dallas, hull number SSN 700, actually flew across the entire country to be in the movie about their own submarine. According to an article published in Sea Classics magazine, at least 2 sailors from the Atlantic Fleet-based Dallas took leave from their duties at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine, traveled all the way to California, and participated in the Pacific Fleet-supported filming. These weren't just random submariners either. They were crew members from the actual vessel being depicted on screen. But the real Dallas sailors were just the beginning. The production hired submariners from San Diego-based submarines because the Navy and the filmmakers discovered it was genuinely easier to use real submarine crew members than to train actors to convincingly portray them. Crew members from the USS La Jolla, including a sailor named Lieutenant Mark Draxton, also took leave to participate in filming. The pilot of the deep submergence rescue vehicle seen in the movie was played by Lieutenant Commander George Billy, who was the actual commander of the real DSRV in the U.S. Navy. The result was that roughly 50% of the Dallas crew members visible on screen were real U.S. Navy submariners borrowed from various commands, creating an authenticity that simply couldn't be faked. The crew of the USS Houston, which portrayed the Dallas in most exterior shots, even gave their month-long filming schedule a special name. They called it The Hunt for Red Ops, treating the entire production like an actual naval operation. Fact 4. Sean Connery replaced a Bond villain. 2 weeks into filming, when production on The Hunt for Red October began in early 1989, Austrian actor Klaus Maria Brandauer was cast to play the Soviet submarine captain Marco Ramius, and filming had already started with him in the role. Brandauer was a highly respected actor who had won a Golden Globe for his performance in Out of Africa, alongside Meryl Streep and Robert Redford, so the producers felt confident they had found their leading man. What makes this casting even more interesting is that Brandauer had previously appeared opposite Sean Connery in the James Bond film Never Say Never Again back in 1983, where he played the villain Maximilian Largo, while Connery returned as Bond for the first time in over a decade. But just 2 weeks into production, Brandauer discovered he had a scheduling conflict with a prior commitment and had to leave the project. Different sources give slightly different reasons for his departure, with some reports claiming he had already committed to another job that overlapped with the filming schedule, while others suggest he may have broken his leg, though the scheduling conflict appears to be the more widely accepted explanation. Whatever the exact reason, the producers suddenly found themselves without their lead actor after costumes had been fitted, rehearsals had been conducted, and actual filming had begun. In a stroke of luck that seemed almost too perfect, Brandauer himself suggested his friend Sean Connery for the role, since the two had worked together on Never Say Never Again and had remained close. The producers quickly faxed the script to Connery, but he initially turned it down because the story didn't make sense to him. It turned out that the first page of the script was missing, which explained that the events took place during the height of the Cold War before Gorbachev came to power, a crucial detail that made the entire plot plausible. Once Connery received the complete script, he agreed to take the role. He arrived in Los Angeles on a Friday and was supposed to start filming on Monday, though he requested one additional day for rehearsal before jumping into the production. Fact 5. The submarine sets. Tilted 45 degrees on giant hydraulic platforms, building realistic submarine interiors for the hunt for Red. October required some seriously impressive engineering that ended up making the actors physically sick, even though they never left dry land. The production team constructed massive 50-foot square platforms that housed full-scale mock-ups of both the Red October and the USS Dallas. And these platforms sat on top of hydraulic gimbals that could tilt and rock to simulate the movements of an actual submarine at sea. The entire contraption stood 45 feet above the soundstage floor at Paramount Studios, and the gimbals could pitch and roll the sets up to 45 degrees in either direction to create authentic-looking submarine maneuvers during filming. Sean Connery later described the experience as genuinely disturbing, despite being a veteran actor who had worked on countless challenging sets throughout his career. He recalled that it was incredibly claustrophobic because they had 62 people crammed into a very confined space that was designed to replicate the tight quarters of a real submarine, and the temperature inside became absolutely sweltering under the bright filming lights with no real ventilation. The constant tilting motion created such realistic submarine conditions that Connery, who admitted he was prone to seasickness, actually became nauseous from the movement, even though the set never went near any actual water. The veteran Scottish actor shot his scenes for about 4 weeks under these conditions, while the rest of the production continued filming for additional months at various locations. The sets were built this way, specifically to avoid the cheesy tilting camera effects that older submarine movies and shows like Star Trek had relied on to simulate motion, where the camera would just angle sideways while actors pretended to be thrown around. Director John McTiernan wanted the physical reality of the submarine movement to be genuine, so the actors would react naturally to the forces affecting them. And the hydraulic gimbals made that possible by actually moving the entire set and everyone on it in a convincing way that cameras could capture from any angle. Fact 6. The USS Houston had multiple accidents. During production, the USS Houston's involvement in the hunt for Red October turned into a string of disasters that would have been unbelievable if they weren't all documented. The tugboat sinking in June of 1989 was just the beginning of what became a nightmare few months for the submarine and its crew. Just 2 nights after the Barcona tragedy, while the Houston was heading back to its home port in San Diego, the submarine cut through the fishing net of a boat called the Fortuna. The skipper, John M. Immerzian, reported that the submarine sliced through his brand new $3,800 net and cost him what he called a substantial catch from 2 full days of fishing. While nobody was hurt in this second incident, it added to the growing concern about what was happening with the Houston during the film production. But the accidents didn't stop there. On July 1, 1989, shortly after leaving port for a training exercise, seawater began flooding into the submarine through a vent valve that hadn't fully closed. As water built up inside the vessel, the commanding officer ordered a steep emergency ascent to reach the surface. However, the additional weight from the flooding water created dangerous hydrodynamics that caused the boat to lose speed and actually begin sliding backward into deeper water. The crew had to blow ballast tanks and push the engines to maximum power to force the submarine back to the surface. While no one was physically injured, several sailors were reassigned from submarine service afterward for psychological reasons because of how traumatic the near-sinking experience had been. Later that same year, the Houston experienced a fire in the machinery spaces, had a close call when an exercise torpedo nearly hit them, after a navigation error took the submarine into a torpedo range and lost a towed array sonar due to more navigation problems. The series of incidents was so serious that it took 2 more near disasters after the tugboat sinking before the Navy finally relieved Commander John H. Soule III of his command. The Houston's participation in a Hollywood movie had turned into one of the most accident-prone periods in the submarine's entire operational history. Fact 7. Too much sunshine ruined filming at Port Angeles. When the production crew arrived at Port Angeles in Washington State to film the dramatic helicopter transfer sequence where Jack Ryan gets lowered onto the USS Dallas, they were counting on the area's famous weather to set the perfect mood. The Juan de Fuca Strait and Puget Sound region is well known for its thick fog, constant mist, and dreary rain that rolls in off the Pacific Ocean, creating exactly the kind of tense, stormy atmosphere that a Cold War submarine thriller needs. The filmmakers specifically chose this location because they wanted those dark, menacing skies and choppy waters as the backdrop for one of the movie's most suspenseful scenes. But Mother Nature had other plans. Day after day, the crew showed up to find bright sunshine and calm, glassy waters that looked more like a vacation postcard than a dangerous military operation. The persistently beautiful weather became a serious problem because shooting the scene in brilliant sunshine with peaceful conditions would completely kill the tension and drama they were trying to create. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved in the production as they watched the forecast hoping for clouds and storms that simply refused to appear. After multiple delays waiting for the weather to cooperate, the production team made an unusual decision. They packed up their equipment and relocated the shoot to Southern California, of all places, specifically to find more dramatic and stormy-looking conditions for filming. It seems completely backward to leave the Pacific Northwest, famous for its gloomy weather, and head to sunny California to find storms. But that's exactly what happened. The crew eventually managed to capture the moody, threatening atmosphere they needed for the scene, even though it meant filming in a location known for the opposite kind of weather they were originally seeking in Washington. Fact 8. The famous Columbus, quote, was completely fake. One of the most memorable moments in the hunt for Red October comes at the very end of the film, when Sean Connery's Captain Marco Ramius stands on the deck of the Red October and quotes what he claims are the words of Christopher Columbus. He says, "And the sea will grant each man new hope, as sleep brings dreams of home," attributing this poetic line to the famous explorer. It's a beautiful, touching moment that perfectly captures Ramius's journey to a new world and his hope for a fresh start in America. The problem is that Christopher Columbus never wrote or said anything remotely like this. The quote was completely made up by screenwriter Larry Ferguson specifically for the movie. Director John McTiernan confirmed this himself in the audio commentary on the special collector's edition DVD of the film, saying quite plainly that Larry wrote the poem for Sean to deliver at the end, and that obviously Christopher Columbus never wrote anything like that, but the gimmick works. Despite this admission from the director himself, the fake quote has taken on a life of its own in the years since the movie's release. You can find it printed on t-shirts and coffee mugs, listed in online quotation databases, and cited in various places across the internet as if it were a genuine historical quote from Columbus. People have searched through Columbus's actual writings, journals, and letters trying to find this beautiful passage, only to come up empty because it simply doesn't exist in any historical record. The quote was crafted purely for dramatic effect in a Hollywood thriller, yet it's been repeated so many times that many people genuinely believe Columbus wrote these words. It's a perfect example of how movies can create their own version of history that becomes accepted as fact, especially when the fabricated quote sounds authentic enough and serves the emotional needs of the story so well. Fact 9. Half the Dallas crew were real submariners, not actors. When you watch the USS Dallas crew operating their submarine in the hunt for Red October, there's a good chance you're not watching actors at all. You're watching real United States Navy submariners doing what they actually do for a living. The production made an unusual decision that turned out to be surprisingly practical. Instead of training Hollywood extras to convincingly portray submarine crew members, they simply hired actual submariners to play themselves on screen. Approximately half of the Dallas crew visible in the film were active-duty sailors borrowed from various submarine commands across the Navy, including some who served on the real USS Dallas itself. These weren't just random military consultants standing in the background either. They were fully integrated into the cast, operating equipment, manning stations, and appearing in scenes throughout the movie. The Navy found this approach so much easier than the alternative that it became the standard practice for the production. The reasoning behind this decision was straightforward and practical. Teaching Hollywood actors to look natural while operating complex submarine equipment, using correct terminology, and moving through tight spaces with the muscle memory of experienced submariners would have required weeks or even months of intensive training. Even then, there was no guarantee they would look authentic to viewers who knew what real submarine operations looked like. By contrast, actual submariners already knew how to do everything naturally because they lived and worked in those conditions every day. Submariners from San Diego were primarily used since they were readily available and could be brought in without disrupting Atlantic Fleet operations too severely. The production also benefited from having the pilot of the Deep Submergence Rescue Vehicle, Lieutenant Commander George Billy, actually play himself operating the DSRV in the film. According to articles published in Sea Classics magazine at the time, sailors from the Atlantic Fleet-based Dallas even took leave and traveled across the country to participate in the Pacific Fleet-supported filming, showing just how much the real crew wanted to be part of their submarine's Hollywood debut. Fact 10. Scott Glenn temporarily commanded a real nuclear submarine. When Scott Glenn signed on to play Commander Bart Mancuso in the hunt for Red October, the United States Navy gave him an experience that most actors could only dream about. To help him understand what it truly felt like to command a nuclear-powered attack submarine, the Navy arranged for Glenn to spend time aboard the USS Salt Lake City, a real Los Angeles-class submarine operating out of San Diego. But this wasn't just a simple tour or a chance to observe from the sidelines. The commanding officer of the Salt Lake City, Commander Thomas B. Fargo, made a remarkable decision that turned Glenn's research into something far more immersive and unusual. Fargo ordered his entire crew to treat the Hollywood actor as if he held equal rank to the actual captain of the vessel. During the overnight trip, crew members were instructed to give their reports first to Commander Fargo, and then immediately repeat the exact same report to Scott Glenn, as if he were truly in command. Glenn would then issue orders back to the crew, but these commands were actually being fed to him by Fargo, who stood beside him the entire time prompting what to say. This elaborate role-playing exercise gave Glenn an authentic sense of the rhythm, language, and atmosphere of submarine command, without actually putting the vessel or crew at risk. The experience had a profound impact on Glenn's performance in the film. He later credited Commander Fargo for everything good in his portrayal of Mancuso, specifically adopting Fargo's calm, even-voiced manner of giving orders even during tense situations. Glenn explained that whatever success his performance achieved was directly owed to now Admiral Fargo, thanking him publicly for the training. The Navy's commitment to authenticity extended beyond just Glenn, as fellow actor Alec Baldwin also spent time on submarines and even learned how to actually steer a Los Angeles-class submarine during his own preparation for the role of Jack Ryan. Fact 11. The movie adopted "The Hunt is On" as the real Dallas's unofficial motto. When the film version of The Hunt for Red October hit theaters in March of 1990, it didn't just become a box office success. it permanently changed the culture aboard the actual USS Dallas submarine. The crew of the real USS Dallas, which was hull number SSN 700, became so connected to the movie and Tom Clancy's novel that they officially adopted the film's tagline, "The Hunt is On," as their unofficial ship's motto. And they carried that motto with them throughout the submarine's entire remaining service life. This wasn't just a temporary marketing gimmick or a passing joke among the crew. The connection between the submarine and the story was deep and meaningful, especially because the USS Dallas had been specifically chosen to be represented on screen. While the USS Houston was used for most of the exterior shots during filming, the submarine being portrayed in every scene was the Dallas, and the crew took enormous pride in that representation. The movie and the book essentially made their submarine famous worldwide, turning an otherwise relatively anonymous attack submarine into the most recognizable Los Angeles-class boat in the entire fleet. The motto became part of the ship's identity in a way that was unusual for naval vessels. Crew members who served aboard the Dallas during the 1990s and 2000s would often mention the motto in interviews and reunions, and it appeared on unofficial crew merchandise and memorabilia. The phrase became a rallying cry that connected generations of sailors who served on the boat, even those who came aboard years after the movie was released. When the USS Dallas was finally decommissioned on December 5, 2017, at Naval Base Kitsap Bangor in Washington State after 36 years of service, the movie and its tagline were prominently mentioned in the farewell ceremonies. The hunt for Red October had given the submarine a legacy that extended far beyond its operational achievements, creating a cultural touchstone that lasted from 1990 all the way until the boat's retirement. Fact 12. Alec Baldwin learned to actually drive a nuclear submarine. When Alec Baldwin signed on to play CIA analyst Jack Ryan in The Hunt for Red October, he didn't just memorize his lines and show up on set. The U.S. Navy gave him an opportunity that most civilians could only dream about: actual hands-on training in operating a real nuclear-powered attack submarine. Baldwin spent time aboard a Los Angeles-class submarine during pre-production, and the Navy didn't just give him a tour or let him observe from the sidelines. They actually taught him how to steer one of the most sophisticated and dangerous vessels in the American military arsenal. This wasn't a brief photo opportunity or a simple walkthrough of the submarine's controls. Baldwin received genuine instruction on the mechanics of piloting an attack submarine, learning the same procedures and techniques that trained naval officers use when they're at the helm. The Navy took his preparation seriously, treating him more like a student officer than a Hollywood actor. He learned how to read the instruments, understand the navigation systems, and actually maneuver the submarine through the water. The training gave Baldwin a real sense of what it felt like to be in command of a vessel that operates in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth, deep underwater, where a single mistake could be catastrophic. This level of access was extremely rare, especially during the Cold War era when submarine operations were among the most classified aspects of military service. The fact that the Navy was willing to let an actor from Hollywood actually take control of a nuclear submarine shows just how invested they were in making The Hunt for Red October as authentic as possible. Baldwin's training went far beyond what most actors do for research, and it gave him a genuine understanding of the weight and responsibility that submarine commanders carry every single day. When you watch him in the film, moving through the tight corridors of the Dallas, he wasn't just acting like he belonged there. He actually had real experience aboard a functioning nuclear submarine. Fact 13. John Milius secretly rewrote all the Russian dialogue. Behind the scenes of The Hunt for Red October, a legendary Hollywood writer was quietly reshaping the film in ways most viewers never knew about. John Milius, the acclaimed director and screenwriter behind Apocalypse Now, Conan the Barbarian, and Red Dawn, did uncredited work on the script at Sean Connery's personal request. According to Milius himself in a 2003 interview, Connery had a simple but demanding instruction for him: make it about me. While the film's credited screenwriters were Larry Ferguson and Donald Stewart, Milius claims he wrote all of the Russian dialogue and sequences in the movie, giving Connery's character, Captain Marco Ramius, much more depth and presence than the original script provided. Milius had previously worked with Connery as the writer and director of The Wind and the Lion back in 1975, so the two had an established creative relationship. When Connery signed on to replace Klaus Maria Brandauer as Ramius, he wanted the character to be more compelling and central to the story, even though the film was technically supposed to focus on Alec Baldwin's Jack Ryan. Milius took on the challenge of enhancing Ramius's dialogue and backstory without completely rewriting the entire film. He added speeches that gave the Soviet captain more emotional weight, including material that paraphrased Captain Ahab's monologues from Moby Dick, where Ramius reflects on his life spent chasing submarines across the pitiless sea and the wife he left behind as a widow. The Russian sequences Milius crafted helped create the film's clever language transition, where the characters start speaking Russian with English subtitles, then smoothly shift to English mid-sentence when the political officer says the word Armageddon, which sounds the same in both languages. This creative solution avoided forcing Connery to struggle with a Russian accent throughout the entire film while still maintaining the authenticity of the Soviet setting. Milius's uncredited contributions helped turn what could have been a standard Cold War thriller into a film with genuine dramatic power, even if his name never appeared in the opening credits. Fact 14. The USS Houston made 40-plus emergency surfacing blows. When the USS Houston was chosen to portray the USS Dallas in the film, the crew had no idea they were about to perform one of the most physically demanding filming schedules in naval movie history. During their month-long commitment to the production, which the crew jokingly nicknamed Hunt for Red Ops, the submarine executed more than 40 emergency surfacing maneuvers, also known as blows, for both rehearsal runs and actual camera shots. These weren't gentle surfacing operations where a submarine slowly rises to the top. Emergency blows are dramatic, high-pressure events where compressed air is rapidly forced into the ballast tanks to make the submarine shoot upward through the water at extreme speed, often breaking through the surface at steep angles. Each emergency blow puts enormous stress on both the submarine systems and the crew members inside, who have to brace themselves as the vessel rockets toward the surface. The maneuver is normally reserved for genuine emergencies when a submarine needs to reach the surface as quickly as possible to avoid disaster. For the Houston's crew, performing this intense operation over 40 times in a single month was exhausting and potentially dangerous, far beyond what any submarine would typically do during regular operations. The repeated stress on the submarine's mechanical systems, combined with the physical toll on the sailors who had to secure equipment and maintain their positions during each violent ascent, made the filming schedule genuinely grueling. The production needed these multiple takes to capture the perfect shots of the submarine dramatically breaching the surface, with water cascading off its hull in the spectacular scenes that moviegoers would eventually see on screen. While the footage looked impressive in the final film, behind those thrilling moments were dozens of real Navy submariners enduring the bone-jarring reality of emergency surfacing procedures again and again, all in service of making a Hollywood blockbuster as authentic and visually stunning as possible. Fact 15. The real Dallas was the first digital combat submarine. While the USS Dallas played a starring role in the hunt for Red October, what many viewers didn't realize was that the real submarine bearing that name was genuinely cutting-edge technology at the time the movie was made. USS Dallas, designated SSN 700, wasn't just another Los Angeles-class attack submarine. It was the very first boat in its class to be built from the ground up with a completely digital fire control and sonar system, making it a technological marvel when it was commissioned in July of 1981. Before the Dallas came along, submarines relied on analog systems that required constant manual adjustments and calculations by crew members. The Dallas changed everything by integrating digital computers directly into its combat systems from the start, which meant faster targeting, more accurate weapon tracking, and the ability to process sonar data in ways that earlier submarines simply couldn't match. This wasn't just a minor upgrade, it represented a fundamental shift in how modern submarines operated during the final years of the Cold War. The timing of the Dallas's digital capabilities made it a perfect fit for the movie's story about high-tech submarine warfare. When the film was released in 1990, the Dallas had been in service for nearly a decade and had proven that digital systems were the future of underwater combat. After commissioning, the Dallas was immediately attached to Submarine Development Squadron 12 out of New London, Connecticut, where it spent years involved in research and development projects, testing new technologies that would eventually be standard on all future submarines. The boat's advanced digital systems gave it such an edge that it earned multiple Battle Efficiency E awards throughout the 1980s and 90s, which are only given to the top-performing ships in the fleet. So when audiences watched the USS Dallas hunting the Red October on screen, they were actually seeing a representation of one of the most technologically advanced attack submarines the United States Navy had ever put to sea at that point in history.